And when we look at, aging, joint pain, dehydration within the tissues, I think that all we've really applied to it is outside in, cortisone shots, surgery, supplements. And when we get into the inside out approach of activating the cells within by stimulating the electricity in a baker's recipe kind of way, so your body has everything it needs to support those cells in creating the acid, we start to hydrate the sponge.
Welcome to Beyond the Pain, the podcast that explores what it really takes to break free from chronic pain and reclaim your life. I'm your host, Leigh Brandon, and someone who's spent over 2 decades helping people get to the root cause of pain that no one else could explain. Whether you're dealing with long-term back issues, joint pain, nerve discomfort, or mysterious symptoms that just won't go away, this show is here to help you go deeper. Because beyond the pain, there's clarity, strength, and power waiting for you. Each week, we'll uncover the physical, emotional, biochemical, and energetic causes of pain and how to transform them. Let's dive deep into this week's episode. In today's episode, I'm joined by the pocket rocket herself, former collegiate golfer, musician, and now breathwork and fascia specialist, Brooke McPoyle. Brooke's journey is nothing short of inspiring. From living with pain to transforming her life through music, movement, and chiropractic care, she now helps others unlock their body's healing potential. Together, we dive deep into the fascinating connections between breath, brain, and fascia, and how these often overlooked elements play a critical role in performance, pain, and recovery. Brooke explains why sciatica isn't always what it seems, how fascia in one part of the body can trigger pain elsewhere, and how stress and emotions can literally shape the way we feel in our tissues. She also shares her unique fascia flow techniques, plus practical tips on breathwork and hydration you can start using today. So whether you're an athlete, an artist, or simply someone searching for relief, this conversation will open your eyes to the power of fascia and breath in reclaiming your health. Let's jump into my conversation with Brooke McPoyle. Brooke, welcome to Beyond the Pain. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for the invite, Leigh.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I mean, I was kind of mentioning earlier, I know you're probably as much of a nerd as I am, when it comes to anatomy, human performance, and, overcoming pain. So I think, we can dive deep into fascia and breath work whilst also keeping it understandable and practical for anyone watching or listening who, might be dealing with pain. We also share a passion for sport and being athletic, but also music. So I think this is going to be really fun as well.
I love that.
Yeah, I've got a very diverse sporting background, but the last 20 odd years, it's been predominantly tennis.
Okay.
My musical background is not quite as wholesome as yours. I don't play any instruments, but I was a DJ for about 12 years. And I studied music production as well, although I've done absolutely nothing with it. But
it's just layers in your mind, though, of how to look at frequencies. I think music production is actually overwhelming to a lot of musicians in some ways.
Yeah.
You have to have an engineer mind and a fortitude to listen to the same sound over and over and over.
Yeah. I mean, I really enjoyed studying it, but, if there was 10 days in the week, then I might actually be able to do something with it. But who knows? One day maybe. So to kick things off, could you share what I would describe as your amazing journey from sports and music to your fascination with anatomy and how that's shaped your passion for fascia, breath work, and helping people out of pain?
Well, my journey has been one designed by pain, honestly. I think the sitting with my pain and the asking, how can I fix this, has brought me into a lot of different corridors. So when I was younger, I learned how to play music. It was a way that I kind of gave myself therapy. My parents were arguing a lot. They're both business owners. There was, a period of time they were separate. And I found my solace with a guitar and writing music. I found that I could trap myself in my room, and no matter what was going on outside of it, I could kind of self-soothe in this very internal, silent, still kind of way. And I think, like many musicians, when you learn an instrument around 16, you become obsessive, you make your fingers bleed. And then, you get to high school and you're like, wow, sports are kind of fun. And for me, I was a girl and I was like, wow, guys play sports. This is an interesting way to get to know the opposite sex. But it was really honestly my dad. My dad told me I wasn't allowed to play golf. And that created a very rebellious notion in my brain that, like, well, now I'm going to play golf and I'm going to play it better than you. And I kind of switched from an obsession of music to an obsession with golf. And I'm grateful to have a little brother who just 2.5 years younger than me learned how to play at the same time. So we would go to the course together, and basically, iron sharpens iron. We learned how to play competitively and execute within tournaments quite a bit, and embarrass ourselves and fail and get better and go back out there. And golf is fun, but you carry a bag on your back. And, when you start to get to college, you start to play, 36 holes in a day. So you're carrying around a 25-pound bag. And I didn't know at the time that my hip click that I've had since I was 3 would create like inflammation and agitation. So as I continued to progress in my athletic journey, and I, became a D1 golfer, I got to play under Coach Joan Joyce. That was the whole reason why I went to that college. She was such a stud, Hall of Famer in 4 sports. And she was in her early 80s and a phenom with the mental game, with the psychology of becoming great, how to take someone who's incredible at a sport and deconstruct their training regimen and then gamify how to increase your ability. So she was really big on creating pressure where there was no pressure. So practices were often competitive with the team. She taught me so much. She lives in my brain in this peanut gallery of sequences. To her, she learned how to play golf at 40 and then turned pro at 42 and set a world record at 44. And the reason why she could do that was because she broke everything down into an equation. And she's most famous for striking out Ted Williams as a softball pitcher. So her mind, her ability to take something that seemed complex and break it into tiny little boxes and then train those boxes and then only train for 2 hours. Like a lot of other pros trained 10 hours a day to get to where Coach Joan could do it in 3 hours. So there was this level of efficiency as a coach that I so respect and commend and have tried to adopt into my life in as many ways as possible. But during the course of playing college golf and carrying the bag on my back for 36 straight holes, which is 10 hours, I started to develop really intense bursitis. So much so that I had to take a couple weekends, I remember my senior year, and literally not walk. I was just kind of like bedridden with this crazy level of inflammation in my hip where every step hurt. And when I would go to the PTs in college, you have access at D1 to like basically all of these sources. Their only options for me was ice, heat, stem, ice, heat, stem, ice, heat, stem, ice, heat, stem. Then as the years progressed, it was cortisone shots. Then it was just, 2 years after college where the doctors started recommending an early hip replacement. And I was just like, wow, this is not, no, like I'm a performance athlete. Like there's no way I'm going to rip my body apart just to get out of this joint pain. And for me, my hips joint pain was a real derivative of my focus of like, okay, well, why is it my right hip and not my left hip? I'm putting the same miles on both knees, on both hips. Like, why does my right one hurt? And like, why is it clicking? And what are my options to make it not click? I got no solid answers. A few years after college, I left the sport. It was kind of a traumatic exit. I had 5 friends pass away in a month. I went to a lot of funerals, and anybody that goes to a lot of funerals in a short period of time, you start to really think about life and death and what am I here for? And does this sport that I was devoted to for 7 years and really put social life aside, put my family aside, I was, I was pretty devoted obsessively, like every professional out there that plays pro. I mean, you put your life
Mm.
aside for the devotion. And I remember playing my last really big tournament, and I had kind of like shot myself in the foot to win. I knew I wasn't going to be in the lead, and I had kind of ruined it. And I had this like sense of release. Both of my parents were watching me. It was a bluebird day. It was so gorgeous. We were, I think we were in Texas or we were in Alabama playing just this phenomenal area. And I remember just like letting go of the attachment of how I played. And it was so freeing. And I made every putt on the back. I had like 6
Mm.
birdies. And I was just so relaxed because I was so grateful. And it was about 4 months after that tournament that I was like, I don't know if I want to just travel all the time. I like my life. I like my friends. The funerals had really kind of tweaked my mindset. The
Mm.
ball was no longer an obsession. Life was more
Mm.
of an obsession. The ability to be around those I loved. And I kind of bounced around job to job. I ended up managing this amazing organic spa in which I met a group of girls that I'm very close with still, and my ex-husband, who's an upper cervical chiropractor. And I started to go to him. I,
Was he a nuka?
he wasn't a NUCA. He was
Right.
actually a Blair chiropractor.
Right.
So Blair is just an acronym for how they look at your x-rays. So like a standard chiropractor would take about 3 different angles and then derive the adjustment there. Blair takes a 3D CT and then looks through the top of your head because it doesn't have the assumption that our frenum, the hole on the bottom of our skull, is symmetrical. And I got very lucky going to his clinic because I ended up with a congenial abnormality. So I only have 5 vertebrae in my neck. So a lot of these
Wow.
systemic issues that I was dealing with, including my hip, kind of came from this birth deformity. And once I learned a lot more about it, I got an adjustment from him, and my digestion changed, my sleep changed, my anxiety changed, my ability to recover. I tweaked my diet and kind of opened up all of the detox pathways for the first time. And as a golfer, I was exposed to a lot of chemicals. So I was
Mm.
very surprised doing my first 3-day water fast that I looked kind of like a heroin addict in detox. I was puking after 12 hours of not eating. There was a lot that was my body was coping with that I wasn't aware of. And I ended up leaving my job and joining his clinic, and we quadrupled its size. We built all of our marketing around free education. So I got kind of a firsthand experience of, what happens when you just start giving back to the community. And when you start educating the community in a way where, doctor means to teach.
Mm.
So he was truly embodying what it means to help people on their own journey. And it was just such a beautiful clinic that we ran and operated together. And during that time, I probably had about 300 different medical lectures that I was with. And like I would go with him to the conferences, and it opened my brain up to how the nervous system operates. And as a golfer, I was like, wow, I didn't realize that my panic attacks, all of these things that I would struggle with under pressure could kind of be traced back to how my nervous system is being trained, how it's being moved. It's a whole entire system. We had a really lovely divorce. I went on to start a band, like everybody does in a divorce, right? You go back to the dream. And when I was recording and touring with my band, I came across that same anxiety and panic attack feeling that golf had brought me into. And this time I had all of these new tools that I had learned. So I took Coach Jones' idea of sequencing, and I took all of these different studies that I had learned from, chiropractors and MDs through the years, and I had derived my own sequence. And here we are years later because the sequences worked. I've been teaching locally for a lot of years. After about my 500th client of just kind of saying the same thing, I was like, man, I should probably record this. And we recorded them and released them online. And now, kind of here I am standing at the the precipice of of a really kind of new, flourishing digital education company for myself. But I didn't realize how much people were ready for this information outside of my local market. I had kind of floundered. I could still fill up a workshop room, but like I would have to work to get people in there. I'd have to sell them on, you need this. You just don't know you need this yet. And when we released online, there was pockets of people all over the world chomping at the bit to learn this information, and it felt very nice. It was like, wow, there's people that are seeing this equation link within the body of how the breath is regulating the heart rate, how the heart rate is talking back to the brain, and how the brainwave is affecting our fascia tension. And it's within this crux of, when adrenaline hits your system, are you paralyzed or are you amplified? And that little dial there for musicians and for athletes is the most important thing of capitalizing on everything that you did to get to game day. And that's what I'm infatuated with teaching people now, is the sequences that help you remain in control as the adrenaline dumps. And it's all done proactively. We have our sequence that we drop into as soon as the heart rate starts to flutter. But it's beautiful how it works under pressure. Accidentally, it took care of joint pain. So my hip click that I've had since I could walk went away after I developed the Fascia Flow program within 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, my joint pain was less than it's ever been. So that gave me quite a bit of confidence to experiment on my parents. Both of their knee pain went away. So I was like, they were perfect guinea pigs. Like, if it worked on my hip, does it work on knees? And now there's thousands of people that have, gotten out of PT, gotten out of surgery. And there's other things that are happening with the fascia. Like my eyesight, I used to have astigmatism. I no longer have astigmatism. I've had a number of members now report the same thing. Their eyesight has improved by 50% like mine. So working with the fascia in a way that focuses on the joints, not just like all of the little aches and pains, but creating stability within the structure, has significantly helped people. So that's kind of the long-winded version. Thanks for your patience there.
No, that was great. I still haven't quite got past the part when you said I only have 5 cervical vertebrae.
Isn't that wild? I'm like a lion.
There's actually an ex-England cricketer. You know the sport cricket?
Yeah, I do.
So his name's Gladstone Small, and he's like this.
Huh.
Now I'm pretty sure he had 1 missing, but not so he would literally, and he was a bowler as well. I mean, I can't even do that and do the bowling motion.
I guess mine aren't missing, they're fused.
Oh, fused.
So instead of 7 being separate, it's like 3
5,
of
6,
them
and 7
are 1,
Right,
so my
gotcha.
C2, 3, and 4 are all smushed together, which, is kind of like a kill switch, in a weird way.
That's interesting. So how much rotation do you have in the cervical spine?
Pretty okay now, because I work really hard on it. Like I think that I would be in an incredible amount of pain if I did not take care of my fascia, and if I didn't have the tools that I have, because the knots in my fascia, particularly on this side, are tremendous. And I think that upper cervical care was enormous for me. I think that kind of opened up what was incredibly stagnant. And even my ear infections as a kid, I think that, this has been an issue for a long time. So big believer in upper cervical chiropractic, particularly doctors who look at the X-rays Blair style, that use 3D CTs, that have a pre and post rest protocol. And I love the toggle adjustment. I kind of don't do the activators. I never get twisted. Twisting could kind of kill me. So I was lucky my introduction to chiropractic was so ritualistic in a lot of ways, based on Dr. BJ Palmer's like very intense protocol. And he even used a thermography machine to measure how my nervous system was being regulated.
Wow.
So I would get adjusted like maybe once every 3 months. So I held for a tremendous period of time, but every week I could see how my nerves were being influenced after a 10-minute pre-rest. So it wasn't just like coming in fresh off the street. But I love upper cervical care. And then that's a top-down approach. The fascia flow that I built is a bottom-up approach. When we think of those both, we start to think of the tuning mechanism within our major fascia bands. And I think there's a real magic there for people that have chronic tense posture in the wrong direction. Those two combos, I think, can reset anybody.
Mm. But it's interesting because, this was one of the things I was going to come on to talk to, and we'll talk about it briefly now, but we might come back to it. But, I know you talk a lot about a bottom-up approach. And what's quite interesting is in the Czech system, we talk about a top-down approach, but also a bottom-up approach. And that I may come on to show you. I don't know if you're familiar with the Czech totem pole.
I'm not, but I would love to see it because, I mean, the chiropractors are all top down because everything is based around the skull staying horizontally. But as somebody that had 3 right leg injuries through college, my fascia had become so bundled that I felt like there's a real oversight of like, wow, if my right hamstring is so crazy tight, that's going to affect my hip change. And even if I hold the adjustment, if I go out and walk around for a few months, that hamstring, unless I work out that scar tissue, is going to be pulling that hip. And then that shoulder is going to want to kind of fight to go up. And that can manifest a bajillion different ways. So I love the top-down approach, but I feel like the bottom-up approach, specifically after injury, or if there's issues within the toes, the control of the toes, that can also throw out what's going on the top,
Yeah, for sure. And that's the beauty of the work that I do. You're looking from both. You're looking from top down and you're looking from bottom up.
Nice.
And in some people it will be top down, some people it bottom up, and in some people it'll be both. You have to deal with both, But I just want to quickly touch on, so in London, she's not here anymore, but we used to have a Nuka chiropractor, and she used to be based near where I was working, and I would often work with her with clients, and the results were just phenomenal. Like if I got someone who had like a really serious neck issue going on and I felt a little bit, I think I need help with this one. I remember one lady, she came in. Oh no, actually she didn't even come in to see me. I was actually in a health club doing back screening on their members, and she came up to me and she wasn't actually booked in, but she started talking to me and she said, look, I'm in severe pain, and I could see the pain in her eyes. Sometimes you can just see it. Someone's in so much pain, and I could tell if she couldn't turn her head because of the pain. Instead of turning her head, she would turn her whole body like that because she literally couldn't turn her head. And she said, "Look, the only solution they've offered me is surgery, and they said I could be paraplegic. There's quite a high chance of me being paraplegic with the surgery." She said, "I don't really fancy that much." And so anyway, I worked with her, but I worked in conjunction with this Nuka chiropractor. And it must have been about 6 months later, I was back at this club. And I'd forgotten about this lady. And I'm setting up. I'm looking quite a long way over the gym. And I was seeing this woman, and she was doing these movement patterns in the gym. And I was thinking, wow, they must have some really good trainers at this gym because her movement is just flowing. She looks amazing. Didn't think anything of it. And then 10 minutes later, I hear, "Hi, Leigh, how are you?" And I turn around and it's this lady, and she's just looking like a completely different person. I was like, wow, what's happened to you? She said, "What do you mean? I've been following your program."
Best compliment ever. You're just like, I did good. This is why I exist.
But yeah, but I could tell so many stories about upper cervical. I had one lady who, I referred her to the Nuka chiropractor, and she contacted me. I can't remember if it was the same day or the next day. And she'd been suffering from dysmenorrhea for over 10 years. And she said, "I've got my period just by having her neck adjusted." So it can be very, very beneficial for people. Let's take a short break because Amelia's story is one I think many people need to hear. She came to me with such severe neck pain, she couldn't turn her head. She had to rotate her whole body just to look sideways. Every movement was painful. She was also bloated, exhausted, and terrified that surgery was her only option. We built a holistic plan that addressed her neck and her gut. The result? Amelia got full range of motion back, her digestion improved, her energy soared, and she finally felt like herself again. If your pain feels overwhelming and you don't know where to turn, grab my free chronic pain breakthrough blueprint at www.bodycheck.co.uk/free pain guide. It's designed to help you get to the root of what's really going on.
I want to mention, just for people that are like new to upper cervical, that there's kind of you don't have to wait till you're in pain to get started. Often children, after being born and all of that tugging on their skull, there's a misalignment. And I really believe that, like, if my parents knew of upper cervical and I got my first earache, that if they would have taken me to an upper cervical doctor and they put me back into place, all of that flooding and inflammation that I had in my ears would have self-corrected and I would have developed differently. Instead, they took the antibiotic route, and I had 8 rounds of antibiotics as an infant for my ear infection. And then I had to develop with this chronic inflammation, which could have created so much of my hip issue, so many things that your body has to associate. So if somebody's kind of like, wow, well, I'm not in pain, but that sounds like a fun experience, just go do it. Go get a consultation with an upper cervical. Nuka's cool. Nuka's a little gentle for me because my introduction was toggle. I really love finding a doctor that does the standard toggle. It's like the hole-in-one. But people get great results on Gonstead, on Nuka, on the Blair toggle, and that's like fun that you're so well versed in it and you've seen people shift, because sometimes you can do all of the right supplements and your intestines are literally not firing. And it's, why is your intestines not firing? Well, it might be happening up here, and it could just be 40% of those nerves are slightly being affected. And then the next thing you know, everything opens back up and you feel normal again.
Yeah, my own experience of Nuka, because before I start working, or before I start referring people to other practitioners, I like to experience their work myself.
Must, yes.
And I remember going to see her, and she was actually based on the edge of London at the time, but luckily it wasn't far from where I was living. And I went in to see her, she did the x-rays, and she said, yeah, I do need to adjust you. Did the adjustment, and she said, look, you might feel a little bit, a bit like you've just smoked a joint afterwards. And I was like, well, I've never smoked a joint, but I don't know how that feels, but okay. And but anyway, she said, and you might feel quite sleepy. You might need to have quite a long sleep. So I was like, okay. And I remember going home, and it was a lovely summer's day, which is unusual in London. And I remember lying on my sofa thinking, oh, I'm just gonna have a little snooze. And I woke up and the clock said 9 o'clock. And I'm thinking, why is it still light out if it's 9 o'clock? And I realized I'd slept for about 15 hours. Nice. And I woke up the next day and I felt amazing. I felt absolutely amazing the next day. So that was my first experience.
Body surgery. It's like your body wants to go into shutdown, and then it's going to do little micro surgeries and healing all over your body. And that's so cool that you have that sounds delightful, a little 15-hour nap.
Yeah, I don't think I've done that since. Even when I've flown to Australia from here, I don't think I've slept for 15 hours. But anyway, so you've mentioned the breath, you've mentioned fascia. What many people don't realize, is how much the breath can affect pain and recovery. Can you explain the brain-breath connection and why it's so often overlooked in pain management?
Yeah, and the breath work that I teach is really unlike any of the other breath work out there. Like if somebody's done like Wim Hof or some YouTube videos, this is not what I teach. So I think it's first important to know that our brain is suspended inside of a fluid called CSF. And this cerebral spinal fluid is very interesting. Dr. Mauro Zapatera was able to put it under a mass spectrometer at Harvard just a couple years ago. And they found the state of this cerebral spinal fluid to be very plasmatic, almost like liquid fascia is how he refers to it. And plasma kind of coagulates. So like I just moved these around, right? This is blood plasma. So this is not CSF fluid, but it responds the same. And if we just leave it here for about 10 seconds, you'll see it coagulates at the bottom. And when our brain is floating in this fluid, I'm just going to leave it here for now, it needs to travel all the way over to the frontal lobe and then back. And we actually make it inside of the ventricles. Here we make about 500 cc's a day, and we make it in 4 separate batches. And depending on the quality of the CSF, right, and the movement of the CSF, we have great brain function or our brain function starts to diminish. So I live in a place in the world in South Florida where there's a lot of senior citizens, and a lot of them get diagnosed with basically prefrontal lobe dementia, where they start to forget where they put their keys. They start to forget where they park the car. And there's this thing about getting the CSF all the way to the front. There's 2 things that we have to pay attention to in order for this to happen. One, which is not as important, is nose breathing. When we nose breathe, the cilia fibers within the nose create this little vibration here that allows the movement of the fluid within the frontal lobe. Now, if my model went all the way down to the lumbar spine, we would find that at the lumbar spine, where the diaphragm and the spine are connected, when we breathe properly, right, which is not how most people breathe, when we breathe, the diaphragm is meant to be pushed all the way down. The diaphragm is a U-shaped muscle. Like our tongue is a really weird muscle. It can go in all sorts of directions. The diaphragm has 3 ridges on it. So if we pretend my hands are the diaphragm, right? And it's sitting basically connected to the heart underneath the ribs. And when we inhale, it comes down, it creates a vacuum within the lungs. And then when we exhale, it pushes up. Now, if someone has been holding their tummy in to look skinny for the majority of their life, they're not really moving their diaphragm much at all, and they're using their intercostals. And when that happens, the cerebral spinal fluid that floats down around the brain and then down through the base of the spine, it doesn't get the pump it needs. So it doesn't get washed. It doesn't get moved through the same way. And these people are going to feel like they have mild brain fog in the afternoon, like they get really sleepy. That we're going to feel like, we're never taking a big full breath. We might be breathing very rapidly and kind of shallow. And the lumbar, when we start to push on the lumbar, the part of the diaphragm correctly. So the diaphragm has 3 ridges in it. We can actually push against the front of our body, the sternum, right? Then we can also push to the outsides of the body, which is one of the harder movements to learn. It takes a little while, but if you kind of tuck in on your intercostals, make them tight, you can kind of feel them push back out. So that expansion, that's how we train it, is we pull them in, then we can learn how to expand them out. And then there's the lumbar. So when I teach the mighty breath to people, we train horizontally. We train a tongue position that will encourage our tongue to be held right against the soft palate, which is back here. So it's a posterior tongue lift. It's not just like placing your tongue on the roof of your mouth, which is decent but lazy cueing. We could really slow motion swallow and lift and kind of suction cup the tongue against the soft palate, which opens this part here, giving us more room for airflow, not only in our nose, but in this area here, which activates a lot of relaxing nerves. So if we were to like sigh with our mouth closed, you can feel that your tongue kind of lifts naturally in your mouth to make a little bit more space back there. So we want to train that tongue posture. So when we do mighty breath, we're horizontal. We're pulling the tongue against this, which is going to allow the nasal glands to detox a little bit more. And then we're going to focus on pumping the CSF fluid. And this is going to allow the brain to become like really hydrated and really nourished. the concept for my breath work is in 10 minutes, not only do we retrain the proper breath so that at all times when you're breathing, you continually have this like washing of your brain, but we're also cleaning the lungs and we're training the elasticity. My goal with all my clients is to double their lung capacity. And the reason for that is because our brain waves and our breath rate are often synonymously paired. Now, there's not a lot of studies out there that I can point to at this point, but we all know that breath rate and heart rate are connected. And our heart, Gil Headley just did this new 5 months dissection. The heart has 80% of its nerves coming back to the brain. So the heart is really informing the brain. And then whatever it's informing, that brain is either preparing for battle or it's starting to relax. Now, based on what the brain says, the body's going to respond to that. So most breath works out there are based off of Dr. Stanislav Grof's work, the holotropic breathing, which is, there's no differentiation. He doesn't make, thank you. Blah, 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 blah. He doesn't make any difference between mouth or nose breathing because he's seeking to use the brain as a drug. And he's gotten great results with people that have PTSD, that have issues. But in America, there's so many people that are already overstimulated and highly anxious, and they want a way to come, to slow, to regulate the body, to start to heal. And we are not going to achieve those results with a breath pattern over 20 breaths a minute. Not saying that a hyperventilation pattern for a short juncture is very healthy. If we get to 2 minutes, we really start to change the chemistry in the body. The body starts to prepare for battle. But around 90 seconds, a very fast hyperventilation kind of breath form can be really good for growing muscle, detoxing the lungs, for, training the diaphragm and the intercostals to work synonymously. I call it like the 1 second inhale. So like if you're a singer and you're a rapper or a metal person, you have to really learn how to pull in as much air as possible within a half second to 1 second. So I'm not saying, throw them all out. They're all bad. I'm just saying that, in dosage, it works great. But when we pass that 2 minute mark, we're going to throttle the body into a totally different mechanism. Mm-hmm. So I've structured my course to just be 10 minutes. There's a lot of science that I add to it so people understand the who, what, where, when, why, and the tips of where some people get stuck and then how to progress. But it's really like we focus on this 10-minute walkthrough that doubles your lung capacity, and we clean the lungs. We make the lung cavity itself, the capacity, twice as big, with the intention of dropping your natural breath rate in half. So if somebody's breathing around, the standard resting breath rate is 15 to 25 breaths a minute. If we drop that in half, we start to calibrate your nervous system and brain waves different, which is a very, very big deal for people who are putting themselves under pressure. So as adrenaline hits the system and you vasodilate and everything starts to, I call it like adding nitric oxide to the car, your heart rate starts to flutter, everything starts to kick on. That either is going to lead to paralysis and panic, or we can start to throttle the system down, slow the breath rate down to 4 breaths a minute is where kind of my goal with people, to have that kind of be a more natural state where it's a bit effortless to drop into a 7-second inhale and an 8-second exhale, which when you have good capacity in a shaped breath, so we're not just randomly inhaling and then collapsing the structure. We are filling up the bottom, then we fill up the back sides and chest. Then when we exhale, we control the musculature like an accordion and we press the air out, which gives you power and control as a singer, but it accidentally lengthens your natural exhale, really assisting in us maintaining a lower breath rate, which allows the heart rate to stay lower, then the brain waves to stay lower, and then the body tension to stay in a state of rest.
And so how does that relate to pain management? Let's take a moment to talk about real-life juggling, because Fred's story might sound familiar. He had wrist, back, and leg pain from years of running and a demanding job and family life. He didn't have time for complicated routines or cookie-cutter advice. So we kept it simple and flexible. Diet, workouts, support, and results. Fred's pain disappeared, his energy came back, and he's now using what he learned to keep building his health on his own terms. If you're busy, burnt out, and in pain, I've got something for you. Download the Chronic Pain Breakthrough Blueprint for free at www.bodycheck.co.uk/free pain guide. You can feel better without turning your life upside down.
So pain, you have to be in a state of relaxation to heal. If you are doing all of the right things, but when you go to work or you're with your kids, you start to, stress out, you're holding yourself back from healing. So if you're asking your body to recover, you have to create the conditions within your body for that to actually happen. And if their resting breath rate, right, let's just say is on the higher end, 25 breaths a minute, and then they get up to go and do the dishes, and they're pulling laundry out. And you can see this with people that are overweight, and you can see this with people that are also very skinny that hold their breath in. So there's no like pattern of, oh, I'm strong, so I breathe good, or, oh, I'm, skinny, so I breathe good. No. That's not the case. It's how that shape is coming into you. So if someone that has a high resting breath rate gets up off the couch and they start doing activities, and their breath rate goes, 30, 35 breaths a minute, that's going to crank our brain waves and our heart rate and our nervous system into a state closer to a sympathetic or stress state, which is going to pull you out. And this maybe is easier to understand with like the person that you love being around that takes no energy from you. Maybe they don't even talk a lot. They're easy to watch a movie with. They're easy to go to the store with. They don't demand too much from you. If you're around that person and you just listen to their breath rate, chances are it's pretty relaxed. And when you're around that friend that stresses you out a bit, that's kind of like, moves really fast, that kind of asks a lot of questions, that's, always needing to fill empty space. If you kind of observe their breath rate, you'll probably notice it's pretty high. And when we just take that simple form of what does our body need to heal, our body needs slowness. It needs more stillness. It needs more gentleness within. Essentially relaxation. So breath is like the key to coming back into the tiny little cells within your being, and then expanding from there into your place of comfort. And depending on if somebody's just gotten out of surgery, this is like very visceral for them. They don't want to partake in the same amount of conversations. They don't want to partake in the same amount of decisions. They kind of want to stay internal and stay within their own field. And the breath is the way that we manage that. So if we do get too stressed out, somebody cuts us off on the highway, there's this biological process that overrides all of our systems to pull us back into a state of stress so that we survive. But the fastest way we can come back down from that stressful state is dropping our breath rate to 4 breaths a minute for 4 minutes. I know Dr. Huberman says 6 breaths a minute for 2 minutes, but I don't find that nearly as efficient. 4 breaths a minute for 4 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, in the check system, we kind of suggest that a normal respiration rate at rest is about 6 to 10. And going over 10 would be considered where you'd start hyperventilation when you're at rest. That's kind of the numbers that we use. So when you talk about, you mentioned how you breathe in terms of where you breathe into. What about it? Do you teach in through the nostrils and out through the nostrils? Because again, I know there's, yeah. Okay.
I'm so the cilia fibers, and I know that, a lot of breath coaches teach the breath very different from me. And I'm a singer. So my frame is, if you're a touring musician and you sang in a smoky bar last night and tonight you have to go back on stage, how do you clear your lungs and make your vocal cords ready. And that's nose breathing, literally as much as humanly possible. And when people teach a nose inhale and then a mouth exhale, they often, like a lot of neuroscientists are huge on mouth breathing because it activates so many nerves, but those nerves are also activated if you have good tongue posture. So I find a lot of half truths when people are talking about the breath. In my world, when we inhale through the nose, these cilia fibers are, purifying, temperature regulating, humidifying, but we also don't want them to lay in one direction. They're like tiny little hairs. We want them to move back and forth. There's a whole process that happens when these are trained to move and wiggle back and forth. We don't want them just lay over flat, like if we're looking at wheat or hay in a field. If the wind only blows them in one direction, you're going to have kind of an unstable plant. But if the wind blows them in all directions, you're going to have health, you're going to have movement. Like this is how our nose cleans itself. We don't, suck our boogers in and then spit them out. We are ideally pushing everything out this way. So the in and out movement of the nose to me is very high priority along with the tongue posture. Most people, they don't really see the tongue as this giant muscle that's responsible for our nasal glands. But truly, when we keep a lifted tongue posture here, we're strengthening that little division between the nasal glands and the mouth, and it assists all of the cartilage to move upward. To remain lifted, to help our oculars open, to help all the sinus. I mean, our sinuses go all the way up here to the forehead, then all the way out here underneath the eye. So every time we inhale and exhale, we are cleaning and moving all of these spaces, but we're also changing our face shape. So people that have kind of like a drooping face, nose breathing is a great thing for them, but also lifting that tongue posture so that, the tongue is lifted and it's supported. And, we have so many diaphragms in the body. It's like the tongue is the diaphragm for the skull, and you got the diaphragm for the lung field, and you have your pelvic floor. Keeping all of those healthy, lifted, moving, toned, I think are really essential to living a good long life.
Awesome. So before I go into my next question, what I think would be good for you to go through, and this is probably not a simple answer, but if you could explain to the audience what fascia actually is.
Yeah. I like to describe fascia like a sponge. So it's a triple helix collagen fiber network is the definition that most of us are settled on right now. The IFAA, which is the governing body for medical literature, has not really identified it beyond just connective tissue. But in the, forward pressing sciences and research, we are all, kind of arguing around the world of where the end and the beginning of fascia is. Because when we look at the bone structure, if we cut a bone in half and saw the inside, the trabecular bone looks a lot like the same exact structure that fascia is. So, is bone just calcium fascia? We'll find out here in the next little bit, but it's a leading argument for me. The way that we've been taught in medical texts about connective tissue is that it's like saran wrap. I think that's a poor definition because there is a grain, there is an opening and closing to things, and there's also a fluid that moves between it. So this was my original model. And as I just started to dive deeper into the science, this is a loofah. Got it for a few bucks at the grocery store. And this is so much better because it's one grown connective tissue. And you can see that in some areas it's more dense and in other areas it's less dense, really a lot like our body. And also there's space for fluid in between the tubes or the fibers. And then inside of the fibers within our body, there's also a fluid that's moving. So the fluid that's inside of these nanotubules is being argued about around the world right now. Some people say it's life force energy. Some people say it's lymphatic fluid. Some people say, it's electrostatic plasma that's, potentially responsible for our magnetic field. We'll see. Again, there's just a lot of conversation about this fluid that exhibits a lot of different characteristics and its ability to adapt. So fascia continues to kind of dumbfound a lot of scientists because there is so many different properties within it. Not only is it piezoelectric, viscoelastic, metaphasic, and polymorphic. but there's this fluid inside of it that we don't really know how to identify. The fluid in between the fascia fibers we know a lot more about, and that's called hyaluronic acid. It's pretty common in skincare products. The hyaluronic acid in most of our skincare products is made out of umbilical cord or shark or like turkey comb, like the weird neck. And a lot of people think that by supplementing it, it'll get to the spots it needs, which I don't believe. I mean that to digest it and then for the body to use it is kind of a long ask. But there is a cell hidden within the deep fascia called a fibrocyte. And the fibrocyte is responsible for making our hyaluronic acid. And for people that don't know what hyaluronic acid is, it is an acid molecule in a very specific shape that can house 1,600 water molecules. So it's this ultimate hydrator. And if I had a bowl of it, if I slapped that bowl, it would kind of act like honey. It would be kind of like viscous and act kind of like it's together. Some people would kind of put it in the column, I think, of like fourth phase water more so. And my program really, there's so many crevices in the body, and like I love a good massage, but joints in my world, our joints are based on the tension within our major fascia bands. So we have 8 major fascia bands that are holding the skeleton up. The superficial back line, the front line, the lateral lines, the spiral lines, the deep fascia. We could maybe argue that the thoracolumbar fascia could be one of those 8 bands. And then these 8 bands separate, and they have 26 different fascia insertions to the back of the skull. So someone like me who had 3 different injuries on one side, I ended up with a hip tilt that was coming from my fascia. And when I started to make tensegrity models, this is Project X. This is a replica. Me and my uncle made it. So Project X was one of the first tensegrity sculptures that was made by Kenneth Snelson. This started to kind of really help my brain understand that like when we have lower body tension, it's going to pretend this is the hip and this is the shoulder. If I pull on this, the hip is going to pull down and then the shoulder is going to pull down. And then if I resolve this, the hip is going to come back up. I need to play with the tension a little bit. And I actually have a commission right now to a sculpture artist to make we're kind of just like the first month in, but he's building a skeleton with the major fascia bands, and it has movable joints so that I can, show this more realistically to people, because those of us with lower body injuries or foot injuries, we don't often think of the cascading kinetic effect through the body. And, fascia is Yes, that's a perfect example. There's I think there's 655 muscles in the body. And as a trainer and a coach, when you're asking someone to activate certain muscle groups, it can be very overwhelming for the clients. But if we shifted as coaches into body lines like the fascia bands, we can actually communicate a ton of information and data to our client. And in gymnastics, when you're working with body lines and body shapes and movements, and you're activating so many muscles at the same time, the fascia language is very easily applied. So not only do I think when our brain understands tension, because we used to build our buildings with just bricks on bricks on bricks on bricks. So when we looked at the body with that linear mindset, what we keep seeing is like Jenga block stacks. So like your bones are holding the muscles, and then, those are working together. But really, like if we look at a marathon runner and they are, running for, if they're a pro, I think it's like 4 hours. And if they're a weekend amateur, it's like 7 hours straight of running. And we look at the distance in our, femur and our lower leg, right? And we have our meniscus here, which is just like basically collagen, right? And these are being smashed together. How are we doing that for 7 straight hours without pain? And it's like our concept of fascia needs to enter the biomechanics of sport, because the body is not just Jenga bricks on top of each other. It's an electrical unit working in unison. And this electrical part, to me, is the most exciting part within the fascia, because the way that we activate this fiber site is through a baker's recipe sequence that we're basically stimulating with movement the electricity to get the cell to turn back on. So it's between movement and compression and a few other different things that we need to get the fascia to work together. And I really think that fascia is going to assist many of us not only to start to come from a place of tension in the body and to learn how to create symmetrical, balanced, and fluid tension on both sides of the body, which I think resolves joint pain. What is joint pain really coming from most of the time? I think it's an imbalance in the structure. And then we make all of these movements and then the joint kind of wears out separately. Well, what's in between that joint? Synovial fluid. What's synovial fluid? Hyaluronic acid in an incredible density. How do we increase hyaluronic acid? It's not outside in, it's inside out. And when we look at, aging, joint pain, dehydration within the tissues, I think that all we've really applied to it is outside in, cortisone shots, surgery, supplements. And when we get into the inside out approach of activating the cells within by stimulating the electricity in a baker's recipe kind of way, so your body has everything it needs to support those cells and creating the acid, we start to hydrate the sponge. And the best way I can describe this is if you get a sponge wet, right? And then you stick it out on the counter, it's going to dry. And it's going to dry from the top down because that's how the sponge is placed. Now, if you take that sponge and you get it wet and you put it vertical, it's going to dry from the top down and it's going to kind of be moist at the bottom. So if we look at our fascia as a sponge, right? And it's fluid on the inside, but then as you age and you move and you get those creaky pains, our concept of aging, right? Look at that like dehydration. And when we start to compress everything in and we give our body what it needs to support it, that moisture will come right back to the top. So if you take that sponge and you squish it to the bottom part, it'll rehydrate the top. And I think this mindset is a way that we can get out of the system, out of the cortisone, out of the surgery mindset and back into, okay, body, what do you need? Let me listen to you. Let me identify where the origin points of these issues are. And that's, for me, the reason of working ground up is instead of focus on pain spots, we're going to focus on the entire structure. Because most of us have a shoulder issue, but I'm at a point where I don't think sciatica exists and I don't think shoulder issues exist. I think that there's just a instability in the structure. And the fastest way that we can even kind of test ourselves is if we take our shoes off and we try to spread our toes. How is our toe function? That tells us so much about our nerve function. Our toe dexterity is an incredible kind of indicator of where we're at. So if someone can spread all of their 26 bones, they can kind of have a sense of them. If they can take their toes and separate the pinky toe and the big toe and there's space between the little ones, they're pretty good. Then the next test would be, can you keep the big toe on the ground and lift the baby toes? Do you have function over them? Then can you keep the baby toes on the ground and lift only your big toe? These are really good ways that we can kind of test how the fascia band is moving. If one foot functions well and one foot doesn't, we can kind of suspect that if we don't take care of that, there's going to be a bad walking pattern that happens on that foot. And our most famous piece of fascia is the plantar fascia because so many people have plantar fasciitis. And that's a major band that's part of the superficial back line that goes down the middle of the foot here. And then it connects to this bone. And plantar fasciitis is often when that band starts to separate from this bone. And still today, many podiatrists hyper focus on this spot. They'll just cortisone shot this spot until you feel better. And that's their only solution. And when I developed plantar fasciitis, I found that the tension was not coming from here, but coming from a spot in my shin. And when that spot in my shin stopped pulling the tension, the plantar fasciitis went away because it's an interconnected system. And the pain is usually more global than local. But having a doctor sit there and walk you through all of those, it doesn't make them any money. So, it's not a system that's going to keep you coming back. To me, I think I found something that's not only working for myself, but working for thousands others. And in the beginning, I remember my clients, they were so hard on me. They're like, I need help with my shoulder. And I was so staunch, like a little general, like, listen, we're going to focus on your toes. But it just seems like it works kind of, unless there's a real, if there's a pro wakeboarder that like pulled his shoulder out. And in that case, we can start to do things that will expedite the healing of the upper body. But it seems like 85% of the time, upper body issues are coming from tension from the lower body. And this is a great way to explain it. As a connected system, all of the things need to work and pulsate together in a rhythm. And if I were to, have an injury that bundled my scar tissue there, it influences the entire structure. The mobility of the whole structure changes, but often with pain, we wouldn't feel the pain there. We would often feel it elsewhere. We might feel it there for 2 weeks, but then once we ignore it enough and then build muscle on it, but it starts to limit everything. Then we have another one a few years later, and the next thing you know, we feel like, oh, it's so hard to stretch and my back always hurts. And it's just because we didn't take care of the scar tissue as it built up.
Yeah. Before I move on to the second part of the question, I'd really like just to ask you about, you said that you don't think there's sciatica. I'd love to hear why you say that. A quick pause because I want to tell you about Amina. She was a personal trainer and busy mum of 3, training hard for a marathon until sciatica and back pain stopped her in her tracks. She couldn't run. She felt frustrated, defeated, and afraid she'd never get back to where she was. We created a focused, realistic plan tailored to her body. A few months later, she crushed her goal, ran a half marathon 5 minutes faster than her personal best, and now she's back running full marathons completely pain-free. If pain has forced you to put your goals on hold, download my free chronic pain breakthrough blueprint at www.bodycheck.co.uk/free pain guide. Let's get you back to doing what you love.
There's so many nerves and tubes and muscles that go through our pelvis. I remember the first time I ever watched a cadaver lab of the pelvis, and I was just blown away at the amount of compression that we are capable of feeling in those areas. And the sciatica is a nerve that runs through there. But if we have any inflammation that comes from any muscle group, from our lymphatic system, from our blood system, that's going to create pressure on the sciatica nerve. So I don't think many people that say they have sciatica problems, I don't think they actually have a problem with their sciatica. They're having some sort of stagnation or congestion within the area that the sciatica is present, and that inflammation is creating that pain there. So when we increase the flow of fluids and the circulation from the foot through the calf to the hamstring through the quad, and we start to, compress through there, identify the origin spots of adhesions, not just taking care of every little ache and pain, but the ones that are creating more aches and pains, we start to see that the sciatica issue was actually just a consequence of pressure or stagnation built up from, sitting for 10 hours a day. Like a lot of truck drivers have sciatica issues. And is it because they're, they have a problem with that nerve, or is it because they're sitting and then there's all of these fluids that are constantly stuck in the pelvis that aren't moving down? And I guess the best way I could explain this to people that are like, what is she talking about? Is that we are a river of fluids. Like our body is just like the sponge. If I had a whole person of the sponge, our nerve bundles would be in here, our blood vessels would be in here, right? But if I tweak you into a sitting posture, all these fluids that a lot of them move electrostatically, So they require, everything to kind of stay in alignment. When we start to create like cruxes and corners, there's a coagulation of fluid here. There's a coagulation of fluid here. There's a coagulation of fluid between the glute and the hamstring. And when we just move these fluids, the symptom of sciatica just disappears. So it's not really a problem with sciatica. It's just a problem with stagnation fluids or inflammation that build up because of congestion within how things are flowing. And like you'd think that stretching, like often the solution for people with sciatica is a lot of stretching, is commonly, not saying everybody treats it that way by any means. But if, you're stretching scar tissue, I don't really think that resolves the issue. I think that, scar tissue needs to be handled kind of delicately so that it unravels without just ripping it apart and then requiring the body to go through a lot of other healing.
Mm. Yeah, I can completely see what you're saying there. I mean, most of the sciatica I see in clients often comes from disc bulges or disc herniations in the lumbar spine. But I guess that's just a different cause from what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think that any one blanket statement for all
Mm.
symptoms is good. So
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
want to sound that way. It's just like what I've seen so far is that symptom tends to disappear so fast when we bring back balance, fluidity, and symmetry.
And it might be, even if someone does have disc bulge or spinal stenosis that is impinging on the sciatic nerve,
yeah.
if you deal with what's going on in the lumbar spine, but also do what you're suggesting, perhaps the recovery would be quicker.
I'm always wondering when people have spinal issues, what their toe dexterity is like. Because when we think of the walking posture for 40 straight years, if somebody's 45, they've been walking around for a lot of years and they have, a mid spine issue, but they didn't have a car accident or they didn't have anything serious. It's like, what are their toes doing? Because if you have one side that's fully functioning and one side that's offline, you can do so many things for the lumbar spine, but it's not going to correct what's happening within the walking or the running or the jumping gait. That could be leading to that mild tension. So I sometimes think that like even the correct there, unless it's like surgery or whiplash or car accident, could sometimes be treated straight from the feet upwards.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so now we know what fascia is. Can you explain your ground up fascia flow and how that helps release pain and restore balance in the body?
Yeah, so we use so again, I built my fascia flow routine for artists and athletes that are on the road. So, I mean, I love a good manual therapist, but like if you're touring for 6 weeks, there's none that you can kind of like trust on the road. You're operating on a tight schedule and you're expected to perform. So I built it for those people in mind. And just like Coach Joan, building efficiency as much as possible, we use a ball. The reason why I don't prefer methods that have a giant, like a block or a foam roller is because we can't access the deep fascia. So if somebody has like lymphedema or sensitive fascia, there might be other methods that are like more gentle and more considerate of that. I built mine for professional athletes and artists who are, running their body amok and demanding a lot out of themselves, both via adrenaline and, recovering from injuries. So I say that just to be like, maybe this isn't for the person that's watching this, but I do have injury modifications for the entire walkthrough. And I am so careful about not sharing too much of it online because I have before and people have applied it to pain spots without full context and they've hurt themselves. And then they reach out and they're like, your thing doesn't work. And I'm like, oh, it's because you only did half of the recipe and you did it wrong, my friend. I would love for you to like really kind of understand what it is and how we hydrate it from within. But essentially we use a ball. It doesn't have to be this special. This is my special ball. This is the tiger tail ball. It's one of my faves. But we could use a baseball. We could use it. I love a tennis ball to start people because there's a little bit of give. If there's some neuropathy on parts of the body, we're not going to injure it. We're not going to bruise it. A cork ball is awesome because it doesn't move around on a slippery floor as much. But you can just use a baseball and wrap it in a sock and kind of manhandle it. But what we do is we simulate an elbow with the ball. And then we are going to drag it through the body in the specific sequence, and we're going to locate the areas that are screaming at us. So there's a little bit of a vocabulary that I teach that helps us identify what parts of the body are, in a sense, causing problems or just reacting to problems. So like tender, achy spots are not nearly as a high of a priority for me as they could be for a massage therapist as electrical, dull, and radiating spots. Those are the things that are going to throw our joints out. And it's what's going to keep, people feeling spring-loaded. So we have a bit of a protocol with how we warm up, how we hydrate before. There's a lot of conversations I have about hydration and sweating. So it's not just water in, it's also how often you're getting the water out. Because stagnant fluids on anybody can create, lots of like swelling issues, lots of stagnation, and that does not allow the body to heal. So like the simplest tip for anybody who wants to help their fascia is starting to sauna 3 days a week minimum. There's so many positive studies of people who sauna 5 days a week, long-term studies, 40-year studies about all of their risks of everything going down. It's because it's a detox pathway. So we get the water out, then we replace the water with really good water. In my world, really good water is spring water that's only exposed to glass. If you don't have access to that, we have reverse osmosis water basically available for everybody. And then you can take that water and remineralize it with your own minerals. There's a long conversation about salt that everybody can have. I'm still kind of in the midst of the study of salt. I really have been preferring, honestly, now sea moss. I found a company that dehydrates sea moss. It's flavorless and it's like loaded with minerals, and it's like a non-salt way for me to kind of get my minerals back. And then there's always honey. Bee pollen and honey has got everything you need. And almost, if you find a local beekeeper and you have reverse osmosis water, you can take that water, put it in a glass jar, put it outside in the sun or the moon for a couple days. It will restructure and magnetize it, and it tastes like rainbow water. If someone goes into a sauna and they get nauseous, or they feel like even worse the next day, that is a sign that the pH of the blood is very, very acidic. One of my favorite ways that I've been getting my family members off of soda is by having them take a pH strip and they pee on it first thing in the morning. Like their first pee, you go pee for a few seconds, then you pop that strip in the stream, and then you read your pH. And our goal is to stay neutral, not too alkaline, not too acidic. But if your body is running acidic for years and years on end because you have energy drinks, you have soda, you have lots of coffee, and then you have crappy purified water, which is $1 billion industry, no matter what we do with the fascia, you're going to kind of feel like you're running on fumes. You're going to kind of feel like things are still kind of sticky and dehydrated. So that's something that anybody could do. I did a podcast with Dr. Richard Nahas, like really devoted to that topic of how do we increase our water quality, that I think is just really, really important for people to understand, how we get the water out and how we get good water back in, and all of the good consequences of that. So the fascia flow recipe itself is we use a ball, we use 8 rules, and then we basically lay on the floor after we do our feet. And we very specifically use this to create a deep tissue massage built to activate the fibrocytes. And then all of the preceding knowledge is really just to help our fasciocytes have what they need to recreate the acid. And that focus itself, it just increases hyaluronic acid. So there's just been like a crazy amount of consequences from that. Women in their 60s, they'll send me this picture of like them half naked and they'll be like, look at how amazing my skin is. It used to be so crepey. And it's changing all over their body because we're making it from the inside out. We're not supplementing it and expecting our body to make it happen. And there tends to be a lot more like debris and stiffness in the body than people assume. And when we start to clear that out, not only do we feel spring loaded again, but there's a lot of subtle shifts and tensions, chronic headaches that can go away, TMJ issues that you've been dealing with going away because this was actually just a consequence of things that were pulling, down on your body. It's really enjoyable when I see people that were too injured to get back to the gym. They start to get back in the gym. I've taken a couple pro hockey players that were, totally retired and gotten them back on the ice for, a handful of more years. That feels really good.
Mm,
Um, so yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
So it sounds pretty easy to do.
Oh, it is. It is. And honestly, when you get the hang of it, you can do it in front of the television. You can do it when you're listening to an album. You don't have to be so intensely present to make it function for you. And it doesn't have to take a long time. I really broke it down into segments where it's like if you only have 18 minutes, you can do this 18-minute segment and you don't really you can do the next segment later on at night. And what I find is that people that commit to 3 days a week, at least 20 minutes, they're getting really good results, specifically knee results. If there's a hip issue, I like to say 3 days a week you need to do the upper leg as well, so it tends to be around like a 45-minute commitment. But then as you get more and more clear, you can taper less. So I'm just on a maintenance protocol now, and I train really hard still. So that's what's kind of nice about it. It's like brushing your teeth,
Mm,
it's a maintenance for the fascia in order for it to flow and to stay fluid as we train on top of it and rip it apart and grow new muscle. We want to make sure that we're growing new muscle, not on top of scar tissue. And that's where people need to take more time with me. The athletes that find me that really did a lot of damage to their body, they're going to see profound results in a year. Whereas someone who, doesn't have a lot of muscle tone, but they have some aches and pains, they can get profound results within 3 months. So it's the inside scar tissue that is more of a long-term process, but we make headway. And we start to really kind of resolve those issues. But it kind of tends to be based on how much damage was done and when they find me.
mm. Yeah, it's interesting hearing you because I'm always, up for optimizing my physical capability. I play tennis. I go to the gym 3 times a week, lifting weights. And, I do the sauna. I eat, I drink reverse osmosis, remineralized, restructured water. And I eat really well. I go to bed early every night. I don't watch, TV. So I'm always looking to add that little extra thing. So every day I'm stretching, I'm doing foam rolling. It sounds like that might be something worth adding to my regime, really, because my goal when I was 40 was to be able to play tennis at the same level when I'm 70 as when I was 40.
Nice.
And I'm over halfway there, and I'm still performing probably better than when I was 40, actually. But I've still got a few years to get to 70, and I'm determined to, be in a position where my body doesn't force me to not play in the way that I want to play, or even not play at all. So I'm all for optimizing my
Do you do
physical body.
any toe exercises?
Well, I wear 5-finger shoes. I've been wearing 5-finger shoes for about
Okay.
18 years. 18 years?
Nice.
17 years.
Vibrams? Like, what do you guys have?
Yeah,
Vibrams.
Vibrams, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So my toes are they're like that, but
Nice.
they're not like that. They used to be like that, but obviously wearing these for such a long time. But I felt I had to train my feet to wear them. Like I couldn't just wear them all day, every day. I
Mm-hmm.
first started wearing them for a few hours, and then, then it'd be half a day, and then eventually it was a full day, and then eventually I don't know any different. I wear them all the time. Interesting. Someone a few weeks ago, I was at a networking meeting, and one lady came up to me and she looked down at my feet and she went, "You need to see a psychiatrist," and was serious. She was absolutely serious. And I just thought, you have no idea. And I was never going to come back at her because, I know she just doesn't know any better.
The mental block is strong on that one.
Yeah. But you just think, wow, if you actually knew how the body functions, if there's one of us that needs to see a psychiatrist, it wouldn't have been me. But people are just, they just don't know what they don't know.
If somebody's watching and they can't fit into 5-finger shoes, because like they have a crossover or like they're not quite there yet, there is a company I found. They make drum shoes, actually. They're called Vratum. Huge toe box. Kind of unlike anything I've been able to find in sneakers. So if somebody's like, man, I can't do the 5-finger shoes because of blah, 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 what we're seeking is large toe boxes so that you can spread out your pinky toes within the shoe. As a woman,
I think
high heels.
Yeah, I only wear high heels at weekends, so I'm okay.
I found high heels that I could do it in. That's like my new thing when I go shoe shopping, is it's like it has to have the kind of a open front anyway.
But Vivo Barefoot, they have a wide toe box as well.
Oh, nice. I'll have to give them a try then. I didn't realize that they had come out with that model.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never bought a pair of Vivos, but they're becoming quite a big brand now. And they do have some shoes. They don't just function well, they actually look really good as well.
Okay.
But I'm very much a Vibram man. I love their shoes. Hi everyone. Now I have something new in the works that I'm really excited about. I know that not everyone can access or afford my one-to-one coaching, even though it can be life-changing. That's why I'm putting together a simple online group program designed to make my support more accessible and affordable. The mission stays the same: to help as many people as possible take control of their pain and live a life without limitations. But this time, it'll be in a supported group environment with a clear step-by-step plan, a setting that can be both powerful and motivating. Right now, I'm just exploring interest, so if you think you'd like to be part of this, just email me at leigh@beyondthepainpodcast.com or DM me with the word group, and I'll make sure you're the first to hear when it launches. Thank you so much. I can't wait to share more with you. Now, back to the show. So, moving on. So you've said that the future of fitness and recovery lies in fascia. Why do you believe that, and what does that mean for someone struggling with persistent pain?
For someone in persistent pain, it means that you need to start taking care of it. That can look like working with a therapist for a while, which I find to be quite expensive, and you're kind of at the mercy of their system. If you use my Fascia Flow, it costs the price of one massage. You have lifetime access, and you build your own sovereignty because you learn proprioception within those spaces. You learn the dialogue, and I kind of equip you with tools so that you can get out of pain. What I find with my clients is the ones that find me for pain, they train hard, they get out of pain, then they stop training. And when their pain returns, they come back, and I get this email like, hey, it's been a while and it's starting to come back. And I'm like, so how long did you take off? It's usually like 3 or 4 months. And it's like, well, try to work it into your routine twice a week. That way you can maintain the results that you've had. So I think it's, for me, the recovery aspect of health and wellness is still just kind of stuck in this supplemental market, and a stretching routine. And stretching is great if you don't have scar tissue buildup. You know what I mean? So that doesn't apply to pro athletes. Stretching when you have scar tissue buildup, you need a different technique. Otherwise, it's very uncomfortable, and you kind of feel like you're pulling apart your body. You feel like you're ripping things. And then if you're dehydrated in stretching, it's intense. But yin yoga, or when you are in a hot yoga class, that's kind of a way to skip that process, because you are going to be moving so much of that hyaluronic acid via sweat. So just a side note. But the reason why I believe it's the future is because as we continue to run faster and to jump higher and to learn new skills, like if you look at the gymnasts of today versus 30 years ago, all of that leverage and bounce is going to come from understanding how we activate and use the fascia to create leverage and momentum. The way that I can explain this in my own sport as a golfer is next year I'm signing up for the World Long Drive Championships. I'm training this year. I'm almost at the metrics already with very little training, which is just such a blessing, because I'm only 5 foot. I'm 5'1" now. I've gained an inch actually with my program, which is wild. And I weigh about 110 pounds, but I can fly the ball about 260. And not all the time, but like in the World Long Drive, you have 6 balls to do it. The way that we create kinetic leverage in the golf swing is upper body and lower body torque and separation. And every mechanical athlete that generates momentum and power leverage, you're kicking a soccer ball, you're using a racket in tennis to, use that kinetic chain that's lower body driven through the arm. So the arm is just consequentially moving. You know what I mean? It's not, we're not using our muscles in the arm to propel the ball. Otherwise, it's going to go nowhere, same as golf.
Yeah.
As a golfer, I never heard the word fascia. But what we are actually doing, the language that we would use is rubber bands. So we would say, okay, so pull your body apart till you feel a tension in the rubber bands of the body tighten. And if we understood fascia, we can train it better, we can recover it better, and we can access all of those lines better. And it's a huge missing link of torque and leverage. So like when I sit down with a golfer, I obsessively look at their front foot and their knee. And depending on how much movement in that front foot and knee depends on, how much they're going to be able to stand up under pressure or break during pressure. And it's how I made money as a gambler. So there was a few years where like the majority of my income came from gambling on the golf course. And I would basically just leverage the fact that I was a small girl. So it seemed like I was kind of the underdog. And then I would purposely create stress and pressure on the person that had the worst knee. So the most knee movement, the more willing I was like to throw money down, because I knew you were going to become unstable, because there was just too much movement there. And it's because they're not thinking of tensegrity. In order to have power, torque, and leverage, when we start to build tensegrity models, we realize that the system is interconnected, the lower body and the upper body. And the athletes that get that are going to jump higher, run faster. They're going to hit the ball farther. And it's the kinetic chain. The kinetic chain is so much more in fascia than in muscles. And this fast twitch muscle training slash the hyper arch fascia training, some of the grotto methods, they're starting to play with these toe activations. And it's the stronger we can make the foot, the more active we can make the foot, the more responsive we can make the foot, the more lit up the sensory cortex is, the more responsive the body is. And when we get into the upper echelon of athletics, that top 1% of the world, the muscle memory that we were all coached to train is actually fascia memory. We're training the fascia to hold particular segments, just like a ballerina. As a golfer, I trained like a ballerina. I trained in front of a mirror with tape. And these positions that we learn, we may have called them muscle memory as we were being coached, but we're training the tension lines. We're actually training, like, so a baseball player that, if you've ever seen a pro baseball player train, often for warming up, they'll take like an elastic band with a certain amount of tension, and then they go through the pitching motion in slow motion in order to warm the shoulder all the way up. And when you watch what they're doing, they're using the tension of the fascia in order to open and move. So rehydrating and recovering our fascia, understanding how it works, is going to be all part of optimal sports. And like then when you even sit down with the PTs that are on the big sports team, you realize that they are so stuck because, there's 3 PTs, there's 50 to 150 players on a team, and they're so nervous before they get out there on the game. Everybody wants the PT to touch them, and the athletes themselves are not empowered to do their own sports recovery. So me and this guy kind of got into it, this famous PT at the Fascia Congress this year, because his approach is all about him. He's the most powerful therapist, and he's the one that they need, and la 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 la. And it's like you're creating a dependent relationship with your athletes. Now, if you can't touch all of them before they go out in the field, they're not ready. And like you're creating a dependent structure instead of sovereignty within them. So I think that athletes, the more sovereignty we give athletes and artists for their recovery, the less baloney is going to be, and the less injuries we're going to see on the field, the longer they're going to be able to stay in the sport. Right now, most pro athletes retire around 29 years old, and it's because their joints break down, because they are experiencing chronic inflammation. They're not as fast as they used to be. Why is that? It's because the fascia was misused and abused,
Yeah. I completely agree with, athletes taking personal responsibility, or not just even athletes, everyday people taking personal responsibility. And I see my role, and I kind of see you're similar in that I see my role more as a teacher than anything else. I don't really like the term healer,
I don't
right?
either. I like the word guide. I'm just guiding you back
Yeah,
to yourself. You don't need me. You just need some instructions and a new vocabulary, is what and that education part is that vocabulary, right?
yeah, absolutely. Something you said just now about muscle memory, my next question is kind of linked into this, and I'll probably come back round to the muscle memory or fascial memory in a second. What's your view on how stress and emotions influence fascia and breathing patterns, and what impact can that have on pain?
Well, anytime we're in a stress response, we're not going to be healing from pain. And so the fascia, it's so funny because some people are so obsessed with the emotional component, and I'm a little avoidant, to be honestly, because when you read like a Barnes book, like his theory on it, the electrical body and the emotional body doesn't even exist within, how much is our electromagnetic field holding some of the cymatic studies that are happening, and people are getting out of pain instantaneously because of a tuning fork kind of pulling them back into balance. I'm not privy to say fascia is responsible or even potentially the container, but it is part of the responsive mechanism. So like if we were to sit here and close our eyes and think about someone that we hate and like the last conversation that we had with them, and like hate's a strong word, so just think of like the person in your life that when you get an email from them, your stomach kind of drops a little bit and you kind of feel a certain way. That's not our muscles reacting, that's our brain reacting to some sort of, input, and then our fascia responding. And the fascia has 6 times as many nerves as our muscles. So even after like a hard workout day, when we're like, oh, our muscles are sore, are you sore? Or are the muscles inflamed and swollen? And you're feeling that pressure on the fascia around it because that fascia is now like tight and
Mm,
constricted. So even our facial expressions, like when if somebody were to take apart the cheek, right, and you look at certain muscles of the cheek, the way that our cheek and our, face muscles grow, there's 44 muscles in the face, they're invaginated within the fascia. So like as we grow, like let's just say this is the fascia field. I'm looking for my other thing. The reason, like how we grow together, is it's like, we sprinkle some liver cells here, we sprinkle some brain cells here, and then the fascia will encapsulate that or invaginate it, and then it'll grow inside of that pocket. Well, some of our face muscles have like 11 invaginations. So when we make expression, are we moving our muscles, or is the fascia responding to all of these little infinite things that are happening within the brain that we see as universal expression? So even like us smiling, us frowning, us, being concerned, us being surprised, how is it that all of us are nerved the same way to move our faces the same way?
mm,
Is it muscles, or is it, fascia is the container in which we get to self-express. Muscles are like the battery packs that we build for whatever actions we keep going over and over. So like swimmers have a totally different musculature than sprinters.
mm,
So the muscles are kind of like trained to be these batteries, but the fascia is this emotional component. It's the energetic component. It's the thing, holding the muscles into place for a contraction. So yes, it does hold emotional stuff. And when people go through my program, they may have memories surface. And what I always tell them is you have all of the tools that you need. And I really look at the emotional component of the fascia just like Cheeto dust. Like after you're done eating a bag of Cheetos and you have the dust all over your fingers, life leaves you with a little bit of Cheeto dust. And until you go back and wash that Cheeto dust out, there may be some residual feelings, there may be some residual flavors. And it's because we don't brush our fascia.
mm,
It's just the simplicity of like, I think the body is this magnificent structure that, can store uncomfortable feelings. But when we have a practice that helps us release those feelings, particularly in conjunction with like slow, powerful breath, We have everything we need to get it up and out. But there is another component in the electromagnetic body that I think is still not mainstream to talk about. But, if you are in a weak, sad place, your electromagnetic body is pretty tight to your
Mm.
body, and you're a little more influenceable, and like you can kind of feel people's presence maybe a little like overwhelming or overstimulating, versus when you're in a strong, mighty space, your biofield is huge and you feel more comfortable, you feel more confident, you are a little bit louder. Um, I kind of, there's an emotional component also to that. And I think they're all a little bit intertwined, how the CSF fluid is moving, how our fascia tension is. I think that influences how big our biofield is or how tight it is. That is always in a state of flux. Um, so I don't want to say like fascia is the main key and holder of all emotional energy, because I do think the electromagnetic is part of it. But if we want to feel free, open, balanced, and fluid and symmetrical in our body, fascia, I believe, is holding the key to that.
Mm. Yeah. So linking that to muscle memory or fascial memory, if we want to call it that. So, it's widely believed that the best storage of information is water, right? And, I've been taught in many different systems that you store emotions in your fascial tissue. So for me, I'm kind of thinking, is it to do with, you're saying it's hyaluronic acid that's in the fascia.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that's also a storer of information, and that it's actually storing emotions because it's a fluid. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that water is still barely understood. And like
Hmm.
as we get into H3O2, Gerald Pollack's study of easy water, and he's just continuing it. He's not birthing anything new. He's really continuing the conversation that foundational sciences have gotten stuck on. And we look at Veda Austin's work. She's the New Zealander that's studying the memory of water in a language. She's kind of taking Dr. Masaru Emoto's work, who said water stores memory, and
Hmm.
instead she's going, but is it sentient? So she's having a dialogue with the water and then taking images of them and creating a language. And she's honoring the scientific process. I mean, she has a lot of different control groups that are doing the same. She's identified 70 or 55 different letters the last time I spoke with her. And she's taking Antarctica water and then studying that to see if there's, information about, you know, things that are happening potentially over there. Um, so when we study like water, minerals, including salt, electromagnetism, plasma, ether, and how that all corresponds to our fascia, cerebral spinal fluid, and how our heart rate, breath rate, and brain waves are all connected. I think we start to circle around the unseen. And Tesla has this beautiful quote about when we start paying attention to the unseen, we're going to make more advances in 10 years than we did for all of the centuries before.
Hmm.
And so I think, to be honest, like fascia for sure is part of getting people out of pain, right? But what fascinates me is this whole next level of when we start to think of the interstitium here. The interstitium that we experience naturally when we're on mushrooms, DMT, or LSD, when we're in that elevated space of our perceptions are now open. We've taken some sort of medicine in order to increase our perception. We also put ourselves into areas of less stimulation. If it's silence, if it's stillness, if it's just a bonfire, if it's just your home and a good, record, all of those things are kind of controlled environments for your perceptions to open up. It's what all of our ancient ancestors and warriors did to increase their ability to fight and to perceive. So when we take these kind of medicine drugs, and I call it like spiritual hygiene, like 4 times a year to get in contact with your soul in a very ritualistic and safe way. There's no driving. You have, a friend keeping an eye out for you. You have a meal prepped for you. You fast before, you kind of get yourself ready. When we get into these states, we start to experience the interconnectedness of everything. We are not separate from each other. We are not separate from the nature around us. We are not separate from the electromagnetic vibration of our family. We are all tied. So I'm hoping that fascia can help assist us in the bridge of how our electromagnetic fields are caught up in our families and our communities and our countries and our world, and realizing that, like, when we build heaven within, we are also resonating heaven outside. So getting out of pain isn't just good for that one person. It's actually essential for our humanity to heal. Because as someone stands in pain, they're resonating this constant inflammation, this constant kind of annoyance, even if it's a bit subdued in their psyche, because we are electromagnetically connected. And I'm hoping that when we start to see the interconnectedness of all of our muscles, bones, joints, and nerves endings, our lymph system, the flow of water that's in our toe 2 days from now could be our cerebral spinal fluid. So the reason why drinking soda isn't great is because it clogs everything up, and then it affects your brain, and that feeling of dullness isn't separate from what you drank 2 days ago. So the fascia, I hope, can start to begin to be this bridge of, your body's a sponge. Yes, then we fix that sponge. And when that pain goes away, the subtle body starts to become louder. The nuanced perception starts to become louder. And when we think of, like, the word intuition, which has been dismissed by so many people, it's a core anchor of how our electromagnetism works. When we get goosebumps, that's electrostatic energy of you picking up on some sort of truth that's in front of you. It is an important, your body is responding to a voltage that's available that is unseen. And in this unseen world of electromagnetism, when we start to feel the subtle bodies, we can now expand ourselves or contract ourselves. We can merge with things, or we can choose to kind of shield from things, kind of clam up like a turtle, to kind of disconnect and pull inside. But we are open systems. There's only so much disconnect that we can create, even with all of the isolation that you want. You can cover your eyes and clog your ears, but light's still going to penetrate the skin. Sound's still going to penetrate the bones. There's only so much disconnect that we have from each other. So I hope that answered your question.
Wow, that was an amazing answer. I wasn't expecting that, but that was fantastic. We are running out of time a little bit, so I'm just going to give you one last question.
Okay.
So, for listeners right now who are living with pain, what would be one simple fascia or breathwork practice that they could try today to begin, easing their discomfort?
Okay, that's great. I would have them lay down fully flat, nothing under the head, so there's no, like, crank in the trachea. So fully flat on the ground, and then slow motion swallow, and feel the back third of the tongue. You might have to do this a few times to kind of, like, lock into that sensation. And then when you slow motion swallow, lock that back tongue into the soft palate and keep it there. This is a technique called mewing. Anybody can go on YouTube and look up, like, the beginner stages of mewing. It's incredible for the skull and for everything. Then inhale deeply through the nose. And as you're inhaling, I want you to feel your belly rise. And then when the belly is all the way pushed out, keep the air there and inhale more and fill your back. Then fill your sides. Then fill your chest. And then when you're filling your chest, open your arms up and just try to feel what it's like to be fully full of air. If you have more room, inhale more. This isn't about a hold. This is about a stretch of the lung field, opening up the elasticity. And then slow motion swallow. Slow motion exhale, feeling like you're pushing the air out of the chest first, then the sides, then the back, then the belly. If you don't feel those muscles, it might just feel like a bottom and a top. That shaped breath rate can assist anybody in slowing down a crazy stressful moment. Just that slow filling up the lower part, then the upper, and then kind of pausing at the top, then emptying the upper and the lower. That simple breathing shape can slow the heart rate down, which is going to slow the brain waves down, which is going to slow down your fascia tension. I guess that would be kind of like to control your breath. Then for the fascia, I would highly recommend increasing the quality of water that you have, getting sauna in, and Really consider, if you're a soda, energy drink, coffee drinker, to get yourself, it's like $10 for some pH strips, and they can just sit in the back of your toilet. And it changes families. Like, I'm telling you, a lot of people that have, like, they feel paralyzed in the morning, they feel stuck in their body, they're probably running high acid. And just that awareness alone can really flip the script for them. For people that want to learn from me directly, I have 3 digital programs and a whole membership where I talk to my members. So I'm all about trying to get as many people as possible into this equation that lives inherently within our physiology. And, for $30, I have my Brain and Breath Connection lecture that really outlines everything that I teach. So for the most affordable person, if you're good at taking notes, that has kind of almost everything you need. And then the audience demanded that I made walkthroughs for injuries and modifications and deeper dives. So I have those there as well. Lifetime access. It's just, please take your sovereignty back. You can heal yourself, but we need to learn a little bit about the basics of the body and how it's held together and what we can do to empower it to heal itself. So just be patient, be loving, be gentle, and learn how to breathe mighty, learn how to make your fascia flow. And you can do that with me, you can do that with others, but please learn to do that.
Amazing. Fantastic. What's next for you, Brooke? What have you got coming up?
Well, we're going to be shifting musical breathwork onto a bigger platform over the next year because we've kind of hit our limit. We've kind of expanded globally faster than predicted, which is amazing. We're coming up on my 4th certification that starts in November. So I take 30 teachers each semester and teach them how to coach the way I do, which involves cymatics, brainwave study, breath rate, and fascia flow, and using that to optimize the clients that they have. Been pretty fun to work with some like coaches that are working with baseball teams and stuff. It's been great. And then I have a sculpture artist right now building a 5-foot tall skeleton that could be acted like a jack-in-the-box. Very excited about that. And I have about 10 projects I've put on the wait list for next year. I'm still learning how to be a good leader. It's one thing to have clients, it's another thing to have some staff. So I'm learning how to be a business owner and have, a couple editors and a design team, and learning how to push us all towards the same goal. And the goal being we take humanity to the next level because we teach them how to tune the instrument. And really, when we get out of pain, there's so much that happens within. The intuitive body, the energetic body, the emotional body, our interconnectedness, our enthusiasm, those things can start to become perceived once more,
Amazing. And where can people find you online?
Musicalbreathwork.com has all my offerings. And then my social media handle is Musical Breathwork, and I'm on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. So please connect with me any way that you want. Me and my team would love to help you.
Amazing. Brooke, thank you so much. This has been definitely one of the most enjoyable episodes I've done. It's about 180 episodes. And yeah, this is definitely up there in the top 3 for sure.
Thanks, Leigh. Your questions were phenomenal. So thanks for letting me kind of dive deep into all of it. It was a blast.
Yeah, amazing. And I'd love to have you back on another time as well. That would be great.
Yeah, let's get you training. So next time we have a chat, we can talk about it deeper.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah.
Definitely. So that's it from Brooke and me for this week. But be sure to tune in, same time, same place, next week on Beyond the Pain. Thanks for listening to Beyond the Pain. If this episode resonated, please follow the show, leave a review, or share it with someone you know who's been struggling. And remember, pain is not permanent. With the right insight and support, you can turn it into power. Until next time, stay open, stay strong, and keep moving beyond the pain.